It was a nice sunny weekend on the beach when I received the call that I'd be transferring to New York City. Life was great here in San Diego, but it was time to give it up, give my position to somebody more deserving. In just under 3 months, I'd fill the role of detective in Midtown Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen. I felt as if the concrete jungle was calling my name with a crescendo of sirens, wailing like banshees. I knew I was due to see the ugly side of New York, so I did what I could to enjoy myself before the inevitable. A week had passed and I found a place in Hoboken to move into, and soon the movers would gather up everything in my San Diego home. I was complimented with some exquisite lodging by my own police department, a rather satisfying location to stay right before I head out east. My last night in San Diego. How do I spend it? Well, I ended up getting in touch with an old flame of mine and we had our way. The morning after, we said our goodbyes and I said hello to a large black cup of coffee. I topped off the jag and I got in touch with an old crush I used to have back in elementary school when I lived in Tucson, Arizona. I called to see if she'd be kind enough to provide me with the place to stay as I head out to New York City. Needless to say, she was just as excited about tonight as I was. It's a 6-hour drive, but she motivated me to make it within about 5.5. No, not the old crush in Tucson. My jag.
Baby did a bad, bad thing. 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 You ever pray with all your heart and soul just to watch her walk away?
The dune buggies and trailers were tearing into the Yuma sand dunes on my left as I made my way through this unforgettable, scorching hot desert. I knew soon I'd be leaving this part of the US in the dust, but I had to make a stop. If you're ever in Yuma, Arizona, you should stop at either Chili Pepper, Mr. G's, or Lutz Casino, or go to all of them if you're that hungry. You won't regret it. I loaded up a few burritos and tacos to fuel me for this nationwide journey, and my Jaguar had nearly 3,000 miles to chew up. The British engine roared through the Desert Cliff Mountains, and, I'm sure, alarmed a few highway patrols that waited patiently for me to emerge out from the narrow canyon road. They knew something wicked this way comes. The Catalina foothills and Mount Kimball were reflecting the evening's sunlight and projecting it out onto the city of Tucson as I made my way in. The moon had already emerged from the mountaintop with practiced bravado, ready to illuminate the midnight sky. I had a sense that was laden and foreboding come over me. Any nocturnal prey that scurries through the night, tonight, will be easily killed by predators due to the moonlight, while I will be easily ordering a meal in the comfort of a chair and warm clothes. Maybe I'm not really the predator in a sense. I know that the perpetrators I put away in the past are in jail, just hoping to look up at the stars one night once they are freed. But surely, I owe my life to some bullet that will come my way. I just don't know when. Dinner was great. Seeing my friend and spending time with her was a success. The next day, I made my way further east, and eventually the terrain changed from desert rocks to healthy, seasonal green trees. The temperature was falling, and so were the heavens from time to time. The hours turned into a few days, but I was in no hurry. My diet consisted of a few 24-hour diners with coffee that either tasted fantastic or tasted like charcoal. Then, finally, I saw the city of the Empire State disturb the natural horizon. Home soon to be, sweet home. To get this story moving along a little bit, I was 2 years into my New York job when I got involved with the most serious drug case I have ever experienced. This involved sharing some quality work time with some DEA officers and a little more time with a detective named Payne, who I met when I first arrived here to New York. I was closest to Payne. Me and him would share some late nights in the office, sorting through file after file, downing coffee and burning cigarettes, while looking outside the window down onto the restless city. There were a few occasions where me and Payne were involved in some shootouts and some vehicle and on-foot chases. We would talk it up with the rest of the boys at the station, but kept it quiet around Payne's wife and my girlfriend. You know, that good-hearted manly image with some detective macho bullshit on the side. But this particular drug case kept me occupied during the weeks and weekend. It kept me from seeing my girlfriend, so I let things end. It was really for the better, especially after the lead I had received. A man named Fonte tipped me off with some wiretapped phone recordings from some heavy-hitting mob bosses and dealers that kept a nice heavy flow of methamphetamines and cocaine between here and the Twin Cities. But there was also one drug that was mentioned named Vanity 10, or VX. I'm not quite sure what the drug could be, what its effects are, or what it even looks like. But the dealer spoke of VX as if it was the most important of their batch. According to them, it was paramount that it makes its way to the Big Apple, due to the request of some major boss here named Kane Lester. I never recognized the name, and I would like to think I have already been well acquainted with a lot of the major drug dealers and bosses here in my city. For all I know, Lester could have just been another Kaiser Soze in order to keep the drug trafficking punctual. I asked Fonte if he knew of Kane Lester. Unfortunately, nothing came to his mind. I decided to start off getting some information from this sleazy nightclub named Carbon, one that tried to seem fresh and modern and bold, yet fell victim like a drugged 19-year-old call girl. The rats scurried across the cold pavement as I made my way to the front entrance of Carbon. I could feel that I had just stepped on some mucky, oily surface, but whatever it was obscured by the darkness. I just hoped I brought in the new plague on the bottom of my shoe. It would surely make my job a lot easier to kill off any mob bosses and junkies that spend most of their nights here. There was no music playing on the loudspeakers, not even bouncers at the entrance, but there were a few strung-out individuals propped up against the wall and some laying down on the alcohol and drug-covered floor. I made my way further into the nightclub, playing at Bogart. I knew this isn't the place a so-called Kane Lester would spend his evenings. He would have preferred something more exquisite and classy. However, I knew that I could make a Kane Lester employee squeal, and that's exactly what I planned to do. I walked into the back room of the club, where a decent club manager could have been working. Instead, I found a familiar someone.
Hey, Tommy C.
Tommy C was a known associate for drug dealers that used him to do most of their dirty work in the decrepit parts of the Bronx.
You know, Tommy C, I've always wondered why your nickname is Tommy C instead of Tommy K like your last name Kennedy.
Well, who wants to know?
Tommy was trying to buy sand for some oversized hourglass, only I was working off of a short fuse connected to dynamite.
I bet the C means you cry. You cry for help. But you can't yell when your lungs are filled with blood, Tommy. I need to speak to Kane Lester. So, where is he?
Tommy C had the brains of the organization that he helped run, but he lacked any balls when it came to assertive confrontations. He was always slick to ambush weary junkies if they were to rip him off, but Tommy wouldn't be pulling any tricks tonight. The only thing that worried me, however, was I'd be Penn and he'd be Teller.
Oh my, you must think I'm really important if you think they're gonna tell me where Kane Lester resides. My bosses don't even have bosses that speak to Kane Lester.
It was then I realized we were both alone, and if he wanted to, and if he could, he'd kill me and he'd most likely get away with it. Just like the rats in this city, he too had niches and old underground pathways to evade to. As I looked around the room, I noticed a bunch of energy drink cans, some bent out of shape and some standing as cylinders already opened. The aroma of energy drinks had filled the room, and I could piece together Tommy was already on something. Tommy's anxiety levels were unsettling to me, and soon his caffeinated mixed drug mind would force his body to do something, maybe even faster than what I'm used to. So I had to use his sitting posture as leverage by closing my reactionary gap. Slowly, I stepped closer and disguised my intentions with a friendly and understanding smile.
Look, Tommy, if you can get me your boss...
I kicked the chair out from under him and I grabbed Tommy around his neck with my forearm. And I spoke to him, right behind his right ear. Tommy, look, you're not the one that is ever going to be in control. But if you tell me what I need to know, I can make your life a hell of a lot easier for you.
Look, the only thing I know is that VX, it's being developed by a doctor in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Please, let's make it easy, and you can take me in or burn this place. I don't care. Just don't hurt me.
Thank you, Tommy. That's all I needed. Tommy gave me some fantastic information that linked up to VX, which probably means that Tommy assumed that that is what I was ultimately after. I was now starting to realize the severity of this VX drug. Alright, Tommy, I'm going to be real with you. I think your Miranda rights are going to be read to you by fallen angels.
What the f***?
I wasn't lying. I said I'd make it easier for him. He wouldn't ever have to hustle, sling dope, or sell whores to those who paid him dirt ever again. As I stood back up, Tommy's lifeless body collapsed on the ground and folded like a royal flush. The smell of the energy drinks mixed with the copper smell of blood, and maybe now the name of the club would have made more sense. This particular energy drink claims to give you wings, but I guarantee you that a point-blank shot to the skull would send a man up to heaven a lot faster, or down to the bottomless pits of hell. I didn't bother to listen for anyone coming towards the door I had entered. In fact, I would have expected people to run away from the sound of a gun going off and escape out the club through the entrance. The good thing about this particular room is there was no window for others to see in, and instead of wasting more time in this lifeless room, I quickly made my way out the secondary door that eventually led to the other side of the building and into another ominous and obscured New York back alley. I made my way back to the office, with the fact I just killed someone looming in my mind like the shadow of the Empire State Building does over its short neighbors. Yes, I killed a half mobster, half junkie. So what? Say what you want about Americans, but when you can serve justice at 1,230 feet per second out of a barrel of not even 5 inches, justifiable karma comes quick, and it's permanent. The other thought that weighed on my mind was how to get involved with intercepting possibly the largest drug trade of the decade. If this VX is as important as the junkies and mob make it out to be. Twin Cities is right now out of my jurisdiction, but nothing the little underwhelming role of playing paper pusher can't fix. 3 weeks slowly went by, and the ongoing investigation for the never-ending drug trade continued to bring in everything I've seen before, but no VX. When I thought all luck ran out of being involved in nipping this VX trade in the bud in the Twin Cities, news came to me. Great news. Alex, a DEA officer, reported a strike team's interest in having me help unravel this so-called VX crafting station in Minneapolis. No, I won't be transferred, but I'd serve 2 weeks in the 2 neighboring coldest cities in the United States, all on the government's dime and a few extra Benjamins. I arrived in Minneapolis-St. Paul a full moon cycle later, maintaining the vampire shift I've been used to. The department showed me around the various drug seedy hangouts, with my eyes set on peering at the Mayo Sports Clinic for some reason. Every time we drive by, I would have this sneaking suspicion that would pop into my mind. Perhaps, if any place was going to run a tight operation with a doctor being in control of a desirable, profitable drug, why wouldn't we investigate the Mayo Clinic here in Minneapolis? We ended up back in the office, night after night, and my time here wasn't extending. I was getting cold feet, but not in the sense of wanting to back out of this investigation, but the confidence I had with the team. And I'm sure their confidence in me dwindled as I myself lacked knowledge about the VX drug and a determined location. I might have to go about this investigation myself, after the after hours. So, I thought I'd start from the outside city limits and work my way inward. After all, I'm familiar that some drug dealers prefer seclusion, and I might just know of a few areas to do some real estate browsing. I decided to venture a few miles north from the outskirts of town. Hours went by throughout the night and into the dawn, and then into lunch. More days similar to this tedious, long schedule continued. On my second to last day here in the Twin Cities, one location, on the outskirts, south of town, was mentioned in an interview conducted with a henchman associated with the MS-13 gang. He mentioned the drug VX is unlike any other drug, and even a strike team of hardened and trained combative tacticians would falter if met with only 10 individuals with VX coursing through their veins. Honestly, this was all just bullshit. The henchman's lame scare tactics were as bad as his cheaply made suit. However, this location needed a search warrant, and there was no way the strike team was going in at night. I really felt as if we weren't getting anywhere in this case, and I would be going back to New York City feeling completely useless. Maybe Tommy C. did die in vain. Not that that should matter to me, but I was thinking about it nonetheless. In fact, because I thought of Tommy's death so much as my time here dwindled away through a restless week, I was experiencing an overwhelming moment of déjà vu. As I sat there, restless, I noticed the moon rising high above the Twin Cities, and any nocturnal prey that scurried through the night would easily be killed by predators due to the illumination of the moonlight, while I could be easily eating a meal in the comfort of my own chair and warm clothes. Not that that should matter to me, but I was experiencing this overwhelming moment of déjà vu. Despite sleep deprivation, I made my way to the south side of town, to the so-called drug location. I felt like a one-man army, determined to bust this case open early, even if I had to make my way back to New York City the next day. I arrived at the location, and what stood before me was an abandoned warehouse. Typical. I sat in my car for about 20 minutes. For some reason, I took my time gathering my plan of approach in a location that could possibly be an exclusion zone by morning, if, tonight, this all went to shit. I sat in my rental car, and all was quiet in the cabin, except for the sound of my black leather jacket as I would bring the coffee cup up to my mouth. I opened up a pack of charms, and I started eating them in order to get my blood sugar up to combat the urge to sleep. I probably looked like some mid-30-year-old man with a sugar high and a few domestic problems at home, and my last desperate attempt to feel good was eating a 10-piece collection of these charms. But the honest truth, I was a pissed-off, overpaid, and sleep-deprived man with a loaded Beretta who's fond of pulling and reloading in about 10 seconds, which was the amount of time I took to eat the 10 pieces of charms. I was well-fed, and I felt unstoppable. I approached the abandoned warehouse. I easily made my way in without drama or anyone in sight. The odor of this massive place had this old rusty scent, with a subtle spice of gasoline wafting around the nearly empty open rooms and the dark hallways. I made my way through the threshold of a door leading into a dark hallway, with a glimmer of yellowish light at the end, and apparent massive shadows due to some industrial furniture to my right and left, stretching all the way down the hall. I listened for a moment, for any clue that somebody might be here, making a fresh batch of VX or at least talking amongst each other. But the most odd feeling about this massive warehouse was not the vacancy, not the lack of lighting or the clutter of dilapidated furniture. It was the sound of wind heard from the center of a massive building. A cold, lifeless atmosphere. Ghostly souls remained, even with windows shattered out. This place was doomed. I slightly stepped into a room to my right, yet I continued to stare down the cold, dark hallway, fetching any courage to make it to the end of the hall. A nerve-rattling scream echoed through the hallway and bounced around the entire warehouse. Even my bullets mimicked my bones, quivering to the unsettling sound. I thought, just for 1 second, the first 9mm in my chamber would be my best friend to bail me out of this and send me into the world of the dark and deceased. But I was already there. I thought soon I'd be face to face with the Reaper. I closed my eyes for a few moments, and when I reopened them, I found myself still in this hellhole, but something telling me to go further. My body undisturbed as I made it to the end of the hallway, but my mind disturbed as it could ever be. I looked towards the source of the yellowish light, which was illuminating another room. An object in the center of the room caught my attention. It looked like a table. I had this understanding. For some reason, this room, despite the objects inside, was vacant of anything conscious. But what laid on the table? I slowly stepped in, checking my surroundings. Nobody else was here, except for what I could assume a body laying on the table underneath a tarp, which the tarp was in tatters. I didn't want to disturb the body by removing its cover. Instead, I looked at the documents scattered on the small round table next to the body, and some scattered on the partly destroyed tile. I saw the X-ray of a person's skull, only the teeth were abnormal. The average canine teeth elongated way past what would be the lip of a human mouth. Upon further inspection, a small arrow drawn in marker, nearly wiped away, was pointing towards the jawline. The document, next to the X-ray image, described the jawline where it would be separated to accommodate stimulated growth to the jaw, this note said, resulting in a larger bite force. I further examined these fantasy-like medical operation notes, and the only thing I could take seriously was the thought of a doctor taking this seriously. I sorted through several more files attached. I even found some type of Necronomicon that included handwritten letters addressed to Beelzebub and bits taken from Deambrium Rigni Novarum Portis. I picked up the additional scattered medical notes that were on the ground, and finally, the letters popped out at me, forming the word, and the numbers matching as well. On a piece of paper, there was a section labeled "the drug used," and in writing was Vanity 10.
Mighty fine product. Wouldn't you agree?
A disturbing, quivering old voice came from behind me. There stood a man in a white coat, stained with soot and what I could mistake as old blood. His teeth looked to have been tampered with and sharpened. His gums bled as he menacingly grinned.
Some of them were lucky to walk away and live. I don't know about Adam, however. Oh, you're right there. Can you check on Adam? Just remove his cover. Would you?
Please, kindly. Victor, please. Kindly, Victor.
How do you know my...
Victor, please. Kindly remove it. Would you? Kindly.
Victor, remove it.
I couldn't help myself. I took out my Beretta and I aimed it at this man's head. He didn't change his posture or facial features. He was still just smiling. He kept on talking to me with this mantra. I was about to utter some words, but I knew he wouldn't answer me. The amount of fear I felt just looking at him was enough for me to nervously shake my firearm as if I was trying to hold up a 100-pound weight with one arm straight outward for 10 minutes. I looked into his dead eyes. His bloody drool falling from in between his disjointed teeth and onto the ground reminded me of his insanity. I fought the urge to pull the trigger, but eventually I failed. I fired one shot, and his body collapsed. All was quiet. Moments later, I heard movement under the tarp. Adam? Are you Adam? Can you hear me? I was focusing on the collapsed doctor I just shot, but my words directed towards the patient. Are you okay? The wrestling under the tarp paused. I retreated to the shadows to mask myself. I tried to get away from whatever this was underneath the tarp and laying on the table. This was no human. There was no amount of man left in whatever was obscured underneath the covering of the table. I aimed my pistol at the covered patient that violently started to shake, and eventually the tarp was thrown off. But sweat would get in my eyes, and I couldn't see exactly what this figure was emerging from the table, and I was trying to get away as well. I could only hear its growls and bellows echo. I found myself an opening in the blacked out shadows. I was working off of some crazy survival instinct to not run into anything, and I didn't. And I eventually found a door. I quickly opened it, nearly smashing the door, and it led me outside. Yes, I have a chance. I don't know if that thing was chasing me, but in front of me, about 50 yards ahead, a few black vehicles contrasted in the snow. As I ran towards them, I saw a couple of doors quickly open up from the cars, and I deviated from my path, and instead, I slid behind some industrial barrels. The snow helped me glide and slide into cover quickly. I heard men shouting for me to come out. They echoed my name, but I stayed hidden. I looked through an opening between the barrels. This was no strike team. They were not cops. These were mobsters, armed, suited and booted. And once the first bullet was fired towards me, I knew they were going to get trigger happy. The sounds of patient Adam echoed and emerged from the warehouse behind me. In front of me, bullets collided with the barrels, producing a deafening impact sound of various caliber. And eventually, a bullet will make it through, piercing my body. I just know it. Patient Adam finally emerged from the warehouse, and I could tell at least a few gunmen started firing at him as they took him as a threat. They knew he was on VX, and he was just as much of a threat as I was. At least, that's what they thought. I certainly don't think I could do the damage Adam was about to do. Bullets dispersed a misty red cloud of blood as patient Adam sprinted towards the gunman. A burning object of mass size impacted my right shoulder blade, and I knew I was immobilized. The heat of my blood dissipated the frozen snow-fallen crystals. If anything other than all of my blood from my body were to leak out tonight, I hope it's finally the exposure of this critical drug, VX. I hope someone hears the gunshots and calls the police, but in any case, if no police show up soon, within a few hours, other detectives will arrive at this location, and they will find what is left of this godforsaken mess. They will search this warehouse based off of the lead, and the short time VX was around will now see its end. This drug is soon to be compromised, and hopefully off the street. I sat there and thought about all the dumb things that I did, going in on my own, not contacting any of the police officers of my whereabouts. But I think my destiny brought me here to my demise. Another bullet impacted my lungs, but I was nearly 100% numb from the pain. I looked up at the moon, and with my hearing nearly lost, I was able to drown out the sound of the gunfire, and I thought of the sound of children playing sports in the streets instead, and they would never come in contact with a drug like VX. Maybe I'm not the most innocent man that hides behind a badge, but I hope the innocence is reserved for those who deserve it.
Mm-hmm.